Welcome to the Moved to Meditate podcast. I'm your host, Addie D. Hilster. This is a place for vibrant discussions about mindfulness, movement practices, and ways to find more balance and presence in daily life. Here you'll find resources to help you progress on your path, as well as insightful conversations with mindful movement, yoga, meditation, and Dharma teachers from a range of traditions. On this podcast, we spotlight embodied approaches to mindfulness and the more contemplative aspects of movement practice. Listen in and connect to a community of like-minded practitioners. Hello, everyone. It's great to be with you on the podcast today. This is episode 70. Thank you for being here. And this week, I'd like to talk about everyday mindfulness, the small moments of pausing and being aware throughout the day. This topic is really about how you can create a supportive mindfulness practice for all the moving parts of your real, beautiful, and sometimes messy life. These kinds of mini practices are really great because we can incorporate them into what we're already doing every day, which means they don't require any extra time. Being more aware during ordinary activities also has a way of making those things more meaningful, and it gives us little pockets of stress relief that can really add up to make a significant difference in well-being. I'll talk about why everyday mindfulness is a great place to start for beginners interested in meditation, and why it's an important part of maturing your practice after you do have an ongoing meditation habit or a mindful movement or yoga habit. You'll also hear about how mindful movement strengthens the connection between meditation and everyday life. And at the end of the episode, I'll offer a menu of everyday mindfulness practices that you can play with this week. Before we jump in, I want to share something that I'm really excited about, the Mindful Movement teacher training that's coming up this fall. I just opened applications last week, and I'm already seeing from the responses that have come in that it's going to be a really fantastic group coming together to study movement-based mindfulness. If you are interested in teaching accessible mindful movement practices with an emphasis on the mindful, please check this out. It's open to meditation teachers, therapists, coaches, and other facilitators who want to add an embodied movement component to what they do. And it's also open to yoga and movement teachers who want to bring a more contemplative practice to their students. All the info on the schedule, the guest teachers we're going to have, the different movement modalities we're going to work with, all of that's on my website at movedtomeditate.yoga/MMTT. Okay, let's talk about everyday mindfulness. To me, everyday mindfulness is about those little moments throughout the day where we can make a point of being fully present. And this can be really organic when we're just like remembering to be mindful, or we can use all kinds of little mini practices to help develop the habit of being more mindful. These mindful moments are important for a couple of reasons. Firstly, taking some short mindfulness breaks could be a really good gateway into meditation practices for those who are new and just kind of testing the waters and getting a feel for how you could benefit from developing more intentional awareness. As a newcomer, you can start to see how incorporating mindfulness into your existing routine can have a noticeable impact on your well-being. I'll give several examples later on in the episode, but imagine how mindful eating or taking a short mindful movement break at work or even being mindful of your screen time can help you create better habits and reduce your stress and help you feel better overall. Secondly, everyday mindfulness can allow us to experience being present and grounded even when we don't have a lot of time or ability to do a more formal meditation practice. I've definitely had phases of my life that were like that, where I wasn't able to sit or do my mindful movement as consistently. But it didn't mean that I dropped out of my mindfulness practice altogether. It just needed to take a different form for a while as a collection of small moments of checking in throughout the day. It was absolutely like that last year when I had to help with caregiving before my mom passed away. And I know it's often like that for new parents as well. So if you're thinking, I am stressed out and I would love to meditate, but there's no way I can carve out the time right now, this could be an option because everyday mindfulness doesn't require adding anything else to your schedule. And thirdly, as you go deeper in your practice, everyday mindfulness is a really important way to connect the dots between your dedicated practice time and how it translates into your daily life. Many of us who have practiced yoga or movement or meditation for a while have gotten to places with it where it's like, what does this have to do with my real life again? Or where the practice feels really separate from the rest of your day. We've probably all had days when we were great practitioners on the mat or the cushion, fully absorbed in the breath or totally into that movement flow. And then we find ourselves flipping out in the parking lot like 15 minutes later. Isn't that kind of humbling? It makes you wonder, right, if your practice is even working. What can be going on there is this tendency that can show up where the practice kind of gets siloed off as this special experience, which separates it from ordinary life. Being willing to let go of the specialness, at least somewhat, and embrace more everyday mindfulness in all of its ordinariness is really what will help the practice to mature beyond that separate compartmentalized feeling. Understanding the scope of mindfulness is one of the keys to how this works. Mindfulness can include everything. And in fact, mindfulness is very much about observing and investigating all aspects of our human experience. It is a system for asking, what the heck is going on here? And learning to be kind and skillful in response to what we find. And when I say mindfulness includes everything, this can be kind of confusing, right? Because we often associate meditation with focusing or concentrating on one thing. And we do use that skill within the practice of mindfulness meditation. Bringing our attention to a specific focal point is a way of narrowing down what we're paying attention to. We do this at times because it helps reduce the amount of stimulation we're processing, which really allows us to settle down and see more clearly. And this is a very important part of any meditation practice. But practicing mindfulness meditation also involves the element of inclusivity, not just narrowing down, but sometimes opening up our awareness. This is an orientation that mindfulness brings to the act of meditation, and that can look kind of different from other styles and lineages of meditation. So that's why I'm making such a big point of mindfulness includes everything, because we actually train that kind of attention in parallel to the focusing aspects in mindfulness meditation. And I think it's really helpful to understand that for your exploration of everyday mindfulness. So you get that those little moments of noticing count, that they are a part of meditation. To give you a little more context about this theme of mindfulness includes everything, I'd like to touch into the Buddhist roots of mindfulness meditation for a moment. The Buddhist tradition talks about the 6 sense doors, or 6 sense bases. These 6 metaphorical doors are like a map of all the different ways that our consciousness gets touched by experience. It's how we perceive what is happening in and around us, which then shapes our experience. The 6 sense doors are eyes and seeing, the ears and hearing, the nose and smelling, the tongue and tasting, body and touching, and the mind with its thinking, feeling, and perceiving. It's your familiar 5 senses plus your mind. Think about it. Everything we perceive or experience comes to us through one of those senses, or through what the mind can create, right? And our mind creates thoughts, feelings, imagination, memory, and reactions to whatever is coming in from those other sense doors, like what we're hearing, seeing, and tasting. And then the mind also creates reactions to its own activity. And we can have thoughts about thoughts, feelings about thoughts, thoughts about feelings, feelings about feelings. It's kind of funny, and it's enough to keep us quite busy. So, realizing that all this activity starts with something showing up at one of our sense doors means that if we can learn to be mindful there, we can really observe our experience quite clearly and directly right at the root, without interpretation or judgment, with curiosity in the present moment. This is a huge part of what mindfulness is about. Another Buddhist term that relates to this that I really like is yoniso manasikara. And I'll put that in the show notes in case you're like, what was that? How do I spell that? Yoniso manasikara. The root word of yoniso is yoni, which means womb. And manasikara refers to directing the mind. So one way I've heard yoniso manasikara translated is to place attention where experience is born. Isn't that beautiful? So what it's saying is we're meant to observe what we're interacting with on a basic level and observe how it affects us, how it gets created, and how we react and what we make out of all of that. But it starts with just being available to notice whatever is arising in the present moment. Let's give this a try with an easy exercise that you can do anytime, and I hope that you'll be able to remember. It's called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm not sure who invented it. I think it's more of a modern tool, but it's an excellent example of everyday mindfulness using the sense doors. So let's pause. Just take a breath. And wherever you are, inside, outside, wherever you are, start to look around. Just kind of shift your eyes around slowly and let your sight land on the objects or the beings that are nearby. And then take your time to name 5 things you can see. Any 5 things that you can see. Just giving it a simple name like plant, paper, phone, book, painting. Next, open to your sense of hearing. There's a whole soundscape around you. Even if you're in a quiet place, you're hearing my voice. And if you listen, maybe you can hear your own breath, or the hum of a refrigerator, or the sound of a car driving by. So listen for a moment and name 4 things you can hear. Now let's tune into sensations. What can you feel through your body right now? This could be sensations of what you're touching, like feeling your feet on the floor, your back resting in the chair, or the fabric of the clothing on your skin. It can also be internal feelings like the movement of your breath or your stomach growling. Take a moment and notice 3 things you can touch or feel. How about 2 things you can smell? And depending on where you are, this can be a little challenging. Maybe there's a scent of coffee or tea from your mug nearby. Or maybe someone is cooking, or there's a candle in the room. If you can't find 2 smells, it's okay to say neutral smell, and that counts too. The important thing is the pausing to notice. Okay, lastly, is there one thing you can taste right now? It might be the remnant of the last thing you ate or drank, or the mintiness of your toothpaste if you brushed your teeth recently. Or again, it could be a neutral taste. So how was that do you feel a little more present and connected to how things are in this moment? Once you learn this 5-4-3-2-1 practice, it doesn't take that long to do. It can also be a great mini mindfulness check-in to do during the day, to take 1 minute to stop and bring yourself back to the present moment through this sensory awareness. And as a side note, it's also really fun to do outside where you might have more things to smell. I like to do it a lot when I'm out in nature and smell the trees or the pine needles or the flowers and the fresh air. And I can also see it being a mindful game you could play with others, kind of like a version of I Spy that you might play in the car or when you visit a new environment that you're kind of getting to know in this mindful way. I also want to say a few words about how mindful movement can fit into this theme of everyday mindfulness. If you have a movement practice or an exercise routine that you do, this can be another rich arena for connecting to everyday mindfulness. Learning to embrace mindfulness in movement teaches us how to be present while we're doing something active. If you've only associated mindfulness with being still or with how it feels to sit in meditation, that can create a bigger gap with trying to apply your mindfulness outside of meditation. If we can stay present to the experience of mindful movement, we're more likely to be able to do the same in other and even in more complex situations, like being present with friends and family members, or like staying grounded during meetings, not being completely lost in thought during ordinary moments like brushing your teeth or walking your dog, which also trains us to be more available for the extraordinary moments, the things in your life that you really don't want to miss. Essentially, we're learning to come off of autopilot, to be aware and really live in a more vibrantly engaged way. There is a beauty in the simplicity of being present for ordinary moments. And so much of our life is just that. Mindfulness encourages us to slow down and truly notice the beauty and the texture and sometimes the poignancy or the tenderness that exists in everyday life. It matters when you appreciate the small things, actually feeling the warmth of sunlight on your skin, savoring the taste of that chocolate cake, or really seeing the person that you're having a conversation with. You might be surprised how much gratitude and contentment can arise just from simple moments like that. In that spirit, I'd like to encourage you to choose a few daily activities that can become mini mindfulness practices for the next week. This can look like taking a few extra breaks during the day, or simply folding mindfulness into an activity that you already do, but just infusing it with that extra awareness and curiosity. So here are some examples or a little menu of everyday mindfulness practices you can try. Let's start with the 5-4-3-2-1 practice we just did a few minutes ago. Pausing to notice 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. This is a great practice to do a few times a day. Maybe when you first wake up in the morning and you sit up in bed, you can kind of orient to the day in this mindful way. Or if you have a few minutes outdoors to take a break, or whenever you enter a new environment, it's a great way to kind of just inhabit it in a mindful way. Another idea is to look for times during the day when your mind tends to wander, and we all have these, especially during really ordinary or repetitive activities. I notice that I often get lost in thought while brushing my teeth. And it's not that I need to think about how to brush my teeth, but I can get into like a worry loop or like a really big like planning storm. And I'm just brushing my teeth and I don't really need all that extra mental activity. For you, it might be washing the dishes, getting dressed, or something else like that. So see if you can identify a time when you often check out or you go into like a bunch of heavy thinking and try to do that activity mindfully this week. So just hearing the sound of the water as you wash the dishes, or sensing your feet on the floor as you walk down the hall. Here's another option that a lot of people like, especially because it helps with the challenge of remembering to do your many mindfulness practices. And remembering can be the hardest part. So you can set a timer on your phone that will chime 3 or 4 times a day, or however many times you like. But yeah, I think 3 or 4 is a good starting point. And whenever you hear this mindfulness bell, stop what you're doing and take 3 slow breaths. Obviously, make sure you do this in a safe way or at a time when stopping for 3 breaths is okay. But I bet you have lots of times during the day when you can afford a 30-second pause. You can also practice mindful waiting. Whenever you find yourself waiting, standing in line at the store, waiting for the traffic light to turn green, waiting for the tea kettle to boil, waiting for a web page to load. Nobody likes waiting, right? But rather than picking up your phone or looking for some kind of amusement or distraction to fill that time, try checking in with yourself. You could just take a few mindful breaths or do a little mini body scan and use that time as a little mindfulness break instead of a moment that feels wasted because you're waiting. One more idea. You can try to be aware of the tension in your body throughout the day. So whenever you notice your shoulders scrunching or your jaw tightening, your belly clenching, your hips feeling stiff, etc., take a very short movement break. And that could be as simple as getting up from your chair and doing 1 minute of shoulder circles, or doing an easy stretch that you like, or doing a full body shakeout to release some stress energy or kind of wake back up. Those are just a few examples of practicing everyday mindfulness. And you don't need to do all of them. It's a menu, and you don't need to order everything on the menu all at once for your mindful meal this week, if you don't mind me taking the metaphor a little too far. But I encourage you to pick 1 or maybe 2 and really try to incorporate that practice for a while and see what happens. Or make up your own everyday mindfulness practices. This is a great opportunity for creativity and personalization, and for realizing that your meditation, your practice, it's not separate from your life. I hope this topic was inspiring and that maybe you're taking away a greater appreciation for how impactful everyday mindfulness practices can be. Have fun exploring and bringing mindfulness to your life in your own way. Thanks so much for listening. Be well until next time. So that's today's episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with a friend, subscribe on YouTube, or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and help others find it that way. To learn more about my work, the Moved to Meditate class library, courses, or teacher trainings, go to movedtomeditate.yoga. This is Addie D. Hilster. Thanks so much for listening.